It was supposed to be just another quiet Saturday morning, a coffee in hand, a light breeze rustling through the oak trees, and the sound of my golden retriever, Max, chasing squirrels in the yard. I had just moved back into my late parents' old house after years of working in the city. To me, that home was more than wood and bricks. It was a piece of my childhood, a place of laughter and memories. But to the neighborhood's hoe, it was just another property under their strict regulations. I had heard the rumors even before moving back how the Maplewood Heights hoe had a reputation for being overzealous, to put it mildly. Complaints about mailbox colors, lawn lengths, even the kind of flowers people planted. But I thought, surely, they'd have some common sense. After all, I wasn't just any resident. I was Judge Daniel Mercer of the County Circuit Court. Still, I never flaunted my position. I believed in living quietly, humbly, and only speaking when necessary. Unfortunately, that day, silence wasn't going to help. The trouble began 2 weeks after I moved in. I was fixing up the side garden, the same one my mother used to tend every spring. It sat right next to the small park area that technically belonged to the hoe but bordered my property line. I had stepped a few feet onto the grassy patch to trim a wild bush that had grown over both sides of the boundary. That's when I heard the voice that would set off the storm. "Excuse me, you can't be there." I turned and saw her, Karen Reynolds, the hoe president, a woman whose reputation preceded her. Her short blonde bob swayed as she marched toward me, clipboard in hand, her expression somewhere between outrage and glee. "I'm sorry?" I asked, lowering my hedge trimmer. "That's hoe property," she said, pointing at the ground like she was issuing a divine decree. "You're trespassing. Homeowners are not allowed to modify or touch community land." "I'll have to report this," I explained calmly. "Ma'am, I was just trimming the bush that's grown over onto my property. I didn't intend to." "I don't care about intentions," she interrupted, raising her chin. "Rules are rules. You can expect a fine. And next time, don't think we won't call the police." I could have argued. I could have told her exactly who I was, but I decided not to. "Not yet." I simply nodded, said have a good day, and went back inside. But the next week, things escalated. I came home from work one evening to find the bright orange violation notice taped to my front door: unauthorized landscaping modification of hoe property. Immediate fine, $500. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I chuckled at first, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. Still, I called the hoe office to clear it up. The secretary was polite but firm. "Mr. Mercer, the board has already voted. You'll need to pay the fine or attend the next meeting if you wish to appeal." So I attended. The next home meeting felt like walking into a lion's den. Karen sat at the center of the table, flanked by her usual enforcers, two board members who nodded at everything she said. The room was filled with residents, most of them too afraid to speak up. When my turn came, I stood. "I'd like to address the fine issued to me for trespassing," I said. Karen smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. "Yes, Mr. Mercer, you knowingly stepped onto hoe property and altered community landscaping. The rules are very clear." "With respect," I said, "the bush in question had grown onto my side of the fence line. I merely trimmed what was crossing over. No property was damaged." "That's not how it works," she said sharply. "We maintain that area. You interfered with hoe grounds. You're lucky we didn't call the authorities." I noticed several residents shifting uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't just about me. She had been bullying this neighborhood for years. I kept my composure. "I understand, but I'll let the proper channels handle it." And with that, I left. 2 days later, I got the knock. It was 8 a.m. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch. "Mr. Mercer, we received a complaint of trespassing from the Maplewood Heights home," one of them said. I blinked in disbelief. "You're kidding." "No, sir. They claim you were warned not to enter hoe grounds and did so again yesterday." I laughed softly and motioned for them to come in. "Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding, but please sit down." They exchanged glances, clearly unsure what to do. I walked over to my study and retrieved a small plaque from the bookshelf. "You might recognize this," I said, handing it to them. It was my judicial nameplate: Honorable Daniel Mercer, County Circuit Judge. Their eyes widened. "Oh, a broken bar. Your Honor, we didn't realize. It's all right," I said gently. "You're just doing your jobs." "But I'll be handling this matter personally from here." I thanked them for their professionalism and watched them leave. Then, I sat down and drafted a formal judicial review request. You see, Maplewood Heights HOA had overstepped not just ethically, but legally. Their bylaws hadn't been updated in years, and several of their enforcement actions violated state property statutes. They'd been issuing fines and threats without proper authority. A week later, during my lunch break, I signed the preliminary injunction myself legally, transparently, and with full jurisdiction. It froze all HOA enforcement actions pending a full hearing on their conduct. When the news reached Karen, she was furious. She showed up at my doorstep again, fuming. "How dare you weaponize your position against us?" she yelled. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "No, Karen, I'm upholding the law, something you should have respected from the beginning." The hearing was scheduled for the following month. It drew a crowd of residents, lawyers, and even local news. During the session, I recused myself from the bench, letting another judge preside, but I testified as a witness, laying out evidence of years of intimidation, illegal fines, and selective enforcement. Several neighbors came forward too, their voices trembling, some even in tears, finally free to speak. By the end, the verdict was clear: the HOA had grossly abused its power. The court dissolved the current board and appointed a temporary administrator to restructure it legally. Karen was barred from holding any HOA office again. When it was all over, I stood outside the courthouse with a few neighbors. One elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, squeezed my hand. "We've been waiting years for someone to stand up to them," she said. "Thank you, Judge Mercer." I smiled. "Sometimes," I told her, "justice starts right at home." In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to change. The tension lifted. People started planting gardens again. Kids played in the park without fear of reprimand, and laughter, real, unrestrained laughter, returned to Maplewood Heights. As for me, I still trim that same bush on the property line. Every time I do, I think of my mother, of fairness, and of how power, and no matter how small, must always be handled with humility. Because the law isn't about control, it's about respect. And that's a lesson the HOA will never forget. Moral power without empathy corrupts, but integrity, even in the quietest moments, errs towards justice where fear once ruled.